Hi, everyone. My name is Sasha Perigo. I'm our Strategic Communications Manager at EBHO. Really excited to host this event today. Yeah, so I'm going to tell you a little bit about the history of EBHO. So EBHO has been around since 1984. Since our founding, we have been one of the leading affordable housing advocacy coalitions in Alameda and Contra Costa County. We are a membership-based organization, and we have over 400 members. Those are individual and organizational members across the Bay Area. Members include individuals who are just passionate about more affordable housing in our community. We have residents of affordable housing. We have nonprofit housing developers. We have some tenants unions. We have funding partners, faith groups, basically anyone and everyone who wants more affordable housing in the East Bay and wants folks to have a safe and affordable home. We're trying to get in the same room and hash out solutions. Next slide, please. All right, so the majority of EBHO's work with our members takes place in our committees. So committees typically meet once a month, once every other month, depends on the committee. And members have an opportunity to participate, to weigh in on our priority campaigns. Anyone who is an EBHO member is invited to participate in EBHO's committees. Our sliding scale membership starts at just $5 annually. And you can learn more about how to join at ebho.org/membership. Today, we're going to hear from our different committee leads and one of our resident leaders, Kathy Eberhardt, about each of their committees and the work that goes on within them. But first, I'm going to hand it off to my colleague, Angelina Cornejo, to talk a little bit about the guiding principles of EBHO's work.
Hello, everyone. Angelina Cornejo. I am the Campaign Strategy Coordinator at EBHO, and I have been at EBHO for about 9 months now. So the way that our work is framed around is this 3 Ps approach. It's producing new affordable homes, preserving existing housing that's currently affordable, and protecting tenants from unaffordable rent increases and unfair evictions. And so this is just a little snapshot of sort of our work through the 3 Ps approach. So in production, we are heavily involved in both the housing element process and also in tracking and the implementation of housing elements throughout our core jurisdictions. We are also heavily involved in helping form expenditure plans for housing bonds that have already passed. An example of that is Measure U that recently passed in Oakland. We are heavily involved in making sure that the funding is being spent equitably and throughout the 3 Ps. And also Public Land for Public Good, which is our ongoing campaign to ensure that any public land is being prioritized for 100% affordable housing and making sure that our public land is used for the good of everybody in the city. In preservation, we recently endorsed SB 225 and CAP, CAP is the California Anti-Displacement and Preservation Program. So that's what SB 225 would implement, and that would be to provide resources to affordable housing developers, community organizations, and local jurisdictions to acquire unsubsidized rental housing from the private market. So that would be acquiring this, people like to call it, I guess, naturally occurring affordable housing and ensuring that it continues to be affordable for years and years. We are also involved in the Berkeley and Oakland TOPA COPA, which is the Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Act, or the Community Opportunity to Purchase Act, which is also an exciting campaign that's ongoing. We are also involved in Oakland SRO and condo conversion. And just for people who are not familiar with what SRO stands for, that's single resident occupancy. So those single resident occupancy buildings. And then we also do a lot of work with community land trusts. So that's also exciting. And in the protection sort of umbrella, we heavily support the work of tenants' rights organizations. Shout out to Oakland Tenants Unions and Tenants Together. We also are involved in Concord and unincorporated Alameda County tenant protections campaigns that are slowly but aggressively ramping up. Sasha mentioned a lot of this work is done in our EBHO committees. And also we sit at regional and statewide coalitions and to advance that work outside of our committee.
All right. Thank you so much, Angelina. I'm going to pass it off to our Berkeley Committee lead, Reverend Sophia DeWitt, to talk a little bit more about our work in Berkeley.
Thanks so much, Sasha, and good afternoon, everyone. It's good to be with you all today. My name is Reverend Sophia DeWitt. I'm currently Senior Director of Programs at EBHO. I've been with the organization about 6 years, and I lead and convene our work in Berkeley, which includes the work of our Berkeley Committee. So our Berkeley Committee does take a very 3 Ps approach to our housing justice work in the city that Angelina just described. And so some of our more recent and active campaigns split up into those different buckets include, in the production area, monitoring and advocating for new funding for new affordable housing development. In past years, that's included advocacy in 2016 for Measure U1, which was a real estate transfer tax on the ballot that provided additional money to the city's Affordable Housing Trust Fund. In 2018, we were big supporters of Measure O and P. Measure O, an affordable housing bond for new affordable housing development, and Measure P, a measure to support additional and new services for individuals experiencing houselessness. And then in 2022, our latest election, we supported Berkeley Measure L, which would have been another affordable housing development bond, as the money for Measure O has been exhausted and all allocated to projects. Unfortunately, Measure L did not pass. We also supported Measure M, which was a vacancy tax on the ballot in Berkeley, which did pass, which taxes owners of vacant property. They can either pay the tax or they can ready the units they have to rent. And those tax receipts go in to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, the local Affordable Housing Trust Fund. Currently, our biggest campaign around production is following the progress of the BART transit-oriented development processes at both the Ashby and North Berkeley BART stations, where there will be major housing development in coming years at both those stations. At the North Berkeley BART station, there is a development team that has been selected and is beginning to work on designs for housing. At the Ashby station, they're a little bit behind the North Berkeley timeline, but that development team should be selected soon. We're anticipating between both stations something like an additional 1,500 new affordable homes in both those locations. That's public land, which we want to have be used for public good of affordable housing. And in the preservation area, we are supporting the Berkeley Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Act policy, which Angelina referenced just a minute ago. And then in the protection area, our most current campaign is support of a tenant right of return policy that the city of Berkeley is working on that would allow historic residents of Berkeley or family members, individuals who've been displaced from Berkeley as the housing market has changed and gotten more expensive, to return to Berkeley to have the first opportunity to apply and be selected for the new affordable home developments that are being constructed in the city. So I would very much welcome talking to anyone on this call who's interested in learning more or getting involved in our work in Berkeley. And I will close up my section and turn it back over to Sasha and our next committee lead.
Thank you so much, Sophia. Next up, I'm going to introduce Aaron Tiedemann, who's going to present about the Concord Committee.
Hi there, everyone. I'm Aaron. I'm the policy manager at EBHO, and I handle our Concord work, which there's a fair amount of in our Concord Committee. So if we go to the first of my slides, the biggest part of our work in Concord is the Concord Naval Weapons Station. This is a inland part of the Port Chicago Naval Base, and essentially after the Port Chicago disaster in 1942, this area was used for munitions storage and has been used for that until 2007, when the base was started to be closed and the Navy started to figure out what they were going to do with the land instead of having it be a storage for munitions. Now, it's a huge area that's completely within the city of Concord. It's about 5,000 acres, which is massive. If you look at it on a map, it is a significant portion of the town. And about half of that is going to be transferred to the city for development into both commercial and housing. EBHO has been very involved in the process of getting the Naval Weapons Station to be developed and get the city to develop it for the better part of 2 decades. And that means that we have been working with a variety of our partners in the area. That includes the Greenbelt Alliance, the Contra Costa Labor Council, Save Mount Diablo, Monument Impact, the Naval Weapons Station Homeless Collaborative, and a bunch of other community groups, all of whom are trying to work to get that development, that really huge, meaningful development, to be as good as it can be. We at EBHO have tried to establish ourselves as a key stakeholder in that process as experts on housing development and connectors between a lot of disparate groups, because there are so many people interested in how this is going to work out with a lot of competing goals for the project. So the project plan is to develop around 13,000 units on the city's portion of the Naval Weapons Station site. Up 25% of which, or about 3,000, would be affordable. That commitment of getting 25,000 or 25% or 3,000 affordable units is something that EBHO was really a big part of getting the city to commit to. We brought expertise to the table, pressured the city to prioritize affordable housing, and have been working to make sure that on the implementation, after they promised it, that it would actually get built. So where we are now is that the city is looking for a new master developer. That basically just means a private partner to supervise, plan for, contract out, and do some of the actual building for this big development. A big part of that is actually them constructing the backbone infrastructure, the connections to water and roads and everything that just doesn't exist on this site. What we're doing as a part of that is meeting with Concord Committee as well as our partners at least a couple times a month to try and make sure that the city's doing all of that right. They have the right parameters for what they're looking for in a master developer. And to highlight a success we've had recently, we have been advocating for the city to work with the Metropolitan Transportation Commission, a regional provider of technical expertise and money, to help get the specific plan for this project going. And city staff recently had several positive meetings with that agency, partly at our urging, and is going to work towards working with them once they have a master developer in hand. So we're very excited about that, and it's a good example of us actually getting something moving on this project. If we can go to the next slide. One of the other biggest things we've been working on in Concord is their housing element. And this is something we're working on in a bunch of cities, so I'll give a brief a summary of what housing elements are and how they work. A housing element is basically an every 8-year plan that every jurisdiction in California has to put together, outlining their plans to accommodate their regional housing needs assessment, basically a number of units the state assigns them to build in that 8-year period, as well as redress housing inequities, protect renters, and generally address the housing crisis. The deadline for submittal of housing elements for all cities and counties in the Bay Area was January, but the vast majority are still working on them. And Concord is one of those. The housing element is a really good opportunity for us at EBHO to try and push for a variety of housing justice items, because it is when they put a long-term plan for everything that a city is going to work on about housing. So we meet with staff, we organize our partners, we turn out to city meetings, and we meet with council members. And we've been doing all of that in Concord a lot as they have been working on their drafts of housing elements. Concord submitted their draft earlier this year, and we had a fair amount of issues with it, which we communicated to them. And HCD, the Housing Community Development Department for the state, largely agreed with some of our analysis. Our role now is to try and keep lobbying those city council members, keep talking to city staff, keep meeting with our partners in the Raise the Roof Coalition and our Concord Committee and elsewhere to try and make sure this housing element is going as far as it can, that it's really redressing historic housing injustice, which it's required to do by state and federal law, as well as breaking up exclusionary areas that are the wider, more well-resourced and richer areas. And so we have some very encouraging backup from the state right now that we're now trying to make sure gets in this next draft and is as strong as possible. And so we're looking forward to that drafting process and keeping talking to the city on that. And then if we can go to the last slide, the last big area that we're working on in Concord is on tenant protections, which is a central focus of the housing element, but also has been something that our partners in this area, especially the Raise the Roof Coalition and Monument Impact, have been working on for the better part of 6 years. And we, with our partners, have tried to turn out residents who are affected by this and make sure that Concord has the type of tenant protections that some of the other cities we focus on have already passed, because it is really necessary. There is a huge threat of displacement in the central poorer parts of the city. The good news there is that this has been a part of their housing element, and we've successfully lobbied some council members to prioritize it, but there's a lot to be done to make sure that they get to it as soon as possible, hopefully by the end of the year, and that they pass a version that really works and will be the best version it can be. So that's another thing we're going to be focusing on with our partners in Concord Committee in the near future. And I think that's all I've got, so I'll turn it back to Sasha.
Thank you so much, Erin. As a reminder, if you are not an EBHO member yet and you would like to come attend a committee meeting to see what we're all about before paying any money, that is also welcome as well. We would love to have you. All right, and next up, I am going to pass it over to Ronnie with our Faith and Justice Committee.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Ronnie Boyd, and I'm the Faith and Justice organizer with EBHO. I've been in this role for about 2.5 years, and I find it very rewarding and very exciting. Next slide. So one of our main campaigns is passing SB 4, which is the Affordable Housing on Faith Lands Act, which would make it much easier for faith-based institutions to build affordable housing on their property. This time around is the third time we've tried to pass this bill in California. And right now, it just passed out of the Senate Appropriations Committee, and now it's on its way to a full vote in the Senate. So we're getting hour by hour updates about where it is in stack, because they should be voting on it very soon. So hopefully we'll have something to celebrate by the end of the week. Next slide. So our annual breakfast, this is something that happens every year, and it's one of Faith and Justice's big events. We hold a community event where we break bread, we have prayers, there's music, there's fellowshipping, there's activities. It's a time to get deep into our interfaith roots and share together as a committee and as a group what the main goal of the Faith and Justice Committee is, which is to promote an interfaith cooperation and to bring in folks who are unhoused or experiencing housing insecurity into the fold. It's really a beautiful event. If you haven't been to any Faith and Justice event and you want to know what we're all about, come to the breakfast. It's a lot of fun, and you'll meet people from all walks of life and from every area of the housing justice community. This year, we're actually going to hold it in August. We usually have it in September, but we changed the day so we can have more staff capacity. So it'll be a summertime event. Next slide. So in April, the Faith and Justice Committee had a visioning session where we came together as a group to decide what we want to do as a committee for the next few months. One thing that came out of that, we want to create a resource for the unhoused that would help lift their spirits. So our newest project is a street outreach project to distribute a booklet of prayers and poems to the unhoused. So it'll be like a pocket-sized thing that will go in your purse, your backpack, your back pocket. That will just be some prayers and poems that will help you feel more connected to the spiritual parts of life, or even more connected to your circumstances and yourself. We're working on that right now, and we hope to have it done by this year's breakfast. So that's what we are up to. We have meetings every third Wednesday of every month at 9 a.m. via Zoom. That is all for me. If you have any questions, my email is ronnie@ebho.org. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ronnie. The Faith and Justice Committee is a really special part of EBHO's work. We're not a faith-based organization, but we house a committee for folks of all faiths to bring their social justice work in their faith into action. And it's a really beautiful space. And also did just want to clarify, I am so sorry I put September on the slide, but as Ronnie said, the Faith and Justice Breakfast will be held on August 23rd this year. So please continue to check your email to look for updates about that, and reach out to Ronnie if you are interested in getting involved with the Faith and Justice work. Next, I'm going to turn it over to Dolores Tejada, who's going to talk about the work in our Oakland Committee.
Hello, everyone. I am Dolores Tejada, the Director of Organizing with East Bay Housing Organizations. I'm also the committee lead for the Oakland Committee. Previously, this had been a committee led by our former Executive Director, Goya Bruce, but in, I would say, December of last year, I started facilitating the meetings, and it's been really exciting because I've been able to implement some amazing changes, and we'll talk a little bit about that and also the work that we've been doing. So next slide, please. So the first thing I should say is our committee structure. We meet once a month on the fourth Wednesday of each month. We have a mailing list, so if you want to join the mailing list to get the notifications for those meetings, please let me know. We set priorities at the beginning of every year. So we have a discussion. This year we did a survey, and then we dedicated a meeting to discussing what the priorities are that we want to set for the year. that is a way for us to share ideas, to share what we are seeing as issues in the organizations that we're at or in the communities that we're a part of. And then we prioritize them based off of popular vote, basically, but also what may have carried over from the previous year that maybe wasn't wrapped up yet. So this year we prioritized Measure U as one of the priorities, as well as the city budget. And then impact fees was another priority. If you want more details on what our priorities are, there is a fact sheet that's available as well. So one of the other pieces of the structure of the committee is that we implemented a new thing called district teams. So what that is that we are dividing our work by city council district as a way for us to connect with other folks in our neighborhood, in our community, and also for us to be able to build stronger relationships with council members based on the districts that we're in. So we've really been able to roll that out specifically as we are working on the city budget. And that is something that we will continue to do as a way to tackle the issues that are citywide and to build capacity, advocacy, power, and really strength. We also have subcommittees. So these subcommittees happen based kind of like in an ad hoc way or based on what is needed. The main subcommittee we have now is what we were calling the A's subcommittee, which was really centered on the potential development that could have happened at Howard Terminal that was being led by the A's. We created the subcommittee to get a group of us to really discuss what it is we wanted to see at that site and to really hone in on what our advocacy strategy was going to be. We are now shifting that subcommittee to talk more about what's happening at the Coliseum. The name will likely change since it's not so much about the A's anymore. It's really about the site itself. And one of the other great things about our Oakland Committee is that we really have built a strong relationship with Oakland's HCD department, Housing and Community Development Department. They join us at every single meeting. Our members are able to ask them questions directly. They provide an update about what's happening in HCD, including any updates with NOFAs or other funding opportunities that may happen or other things that we may be able to provide feedback on or that would be useful for our membership to know. Next slide. So I want to discuss a particular campaign that we have been working on and we continue to work on, and that is Measure U implementation. So that actually started even before Measure U was put on the ballot as a way to be thought partners and provide input and feedback on what Measure U looked like, also advocating to get it on the ballot and then educating folks on what it was. And now that it has passed, providing input and feedback directly to Oakland's HCD department through different strategy sessions that we co-hosted with them to name what priorities we wanted to see Measure U fund. As Measure U continues to be funded and it continues to roll out, we definitely want to make sure that we're keeping an eye on it. So this is a great committee to make sure that you have the latest updates on how implementation is going and having oversight on what is happening with Measure U. Earlier this year, we advocated successfully to City Council for $63 million of funds to be pre-allocated from Measure U. So that is one of the successes of the work of the Oakland Committee. Next slide. Currently, we are working on the Oakland People's Budget. So we developed priorities and talking points through thought partnering in our committee meetings and speaking directly to committee members. And so we had conversations this year on what our priorities are, what are the things that the budget can actually tackle, what are we anticipating the mayor's budget to look like, how do we set priorities so that we can be in alignment with council members and push for the things that we need, really just creating a more direct line between the feedback from our members to actual policymakers. And that is one of the roles of EBHO staff is we want to hear directly from you at these committee meetings, have those discussions, talk it through, develop a plan and a strategy, and then implement that plan and strategy, targeting the policymakers. So another key point of our People's Budget work is that we are part of the Oakland People's Budget Coalition, and we are the leading organization on affordable housing. And we're able to advocate as a part of that coalition in partnership with other community-based organizations and groups. We are supporting the coalition goals in the same way that the coalition has the shared goals that we have. So I think that's it, right? Is there another slide? That's pretty much it. As I said, we have a lot of work that we do in there, and it's really a space to be thought partners, to provide feedback, to hear directly from Oakland HCD and ask questions, to know the latest news that is connected to Oakland. That is the space to be. So I hope that you will consider joining. And if you do want to join, please email me and we will connect.
Thank you so much, Dolores. That was great. Really appreciate it. Next up, I'm going to introduce Kathy Eberhardt. Kathy is one of our affordable housing resident leaders, and she's also the recipient of our Affordable Housing Month Housing Hero Award. Thanks, Kathy.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kathy Eberhardt. I have been a member of the EBHO RCOP for the last 5 years, and I'm happy to be here to give you a talk about the RCOP committee. Okay, RCOP stands for Resident Community Organizing Program. In this committee, EBHO members who are residents of affordable housing discuss and strategize about local and state campaigns that help to produce, preserve, or protect affordable housing. RCOP committee demonstrates the importance of including those directly affected by our housing challenges on finding and fighting for the solution. We work on campaigns. Some of the local campaigns we have been working on are the Oakland City budget, the Howard's Terminal Stadium CBA process, the Oakland eviction moratorium, and the Oakland housing element. Some of the state campaigns we have been working on this year are AB 312, which is the statewide affordable housing registry, AB 745, which is the reentry housing and workforce development program, and AB 653, Federal Housing Voucher Acceleration Program. Much of the work we do at the state level is coordinated through the partner organization Residents United Network, or RUN, which is very much the RCOP committee, but at a state level. How we participate in campaigns. The way we participate in campaigns includes attending coalition meetings, giving comments in council meetings and legislative hearings, speaking with the press, speaking at press conferences, phone banking, and much more. The Leadership Academy, which is how I became a member of EBHO RCOP. EBHO also seeks to empower residents, leading by giving them an introductory course in organizing and affordable housing. We do this through our Leadership Academy program. The Leadership Academy program is an 8-session intensive course that teaches residents, staff, and advocates of affordable housing organization tools and the housing policy. Graduating from the Leadership Academy is required before joining the RCOP committee. Okay, RCOP is my favorite committee. I'm a person with lived experience. I was homeless. It was very trying, and it was very traumatic for me when I was homeless on seeking affordable housing. And I vowed to make a difference so that people wouldn't have to go through the same thing that I did when I was homeless and finding affordable housing. EBHO RCOP does just that. They teach you the injustices and what has gone on throughout the years that makes it hard and close to impossible on affording and getting affordable housing and finding it. They have the same values that I have within myself as a personal growth. Like I said, EBHO RCOP committee is my favorite committee, and I hope that you guys can join the Leadership Academy and become a member. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Kathy. We really appreciate you. And then last, but certainly not least, we're going to hear from Jeff Levin about our Regional Policy Committee.
Thank you, Sasha. Good afternoon, everybody. Great to see so many people here. I want to talk a little about our not entirely accurately named Regional Policy Committee, which actually at this point deals with state legislation, regional policy, and some local policy in jurisdictions where we don't have separate committees as we do for Oakland, Berkeley, and Concord, for example. We formed this committee over a decade ago, initially in response to the first regional Plan Bay Area, which is a regional plan. We'll talk about that in a minute. And the committee has grown and evolved since then. We meet every month on the third Thursday of the month from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. And we certainly welcome people participating. At the end, we'll drop a link to let you know how to join. Next slide, please. So let me start with the work we do on state legislation. First, we track and analyze state legislation, looking at housing bills that are introduced, providing people on the committee with information about those bills. We try and winnow it down. There are so many housing bills every year, and we try and focus and prioritize. So the first thing we do is just to give people some basic information about those bills, but also to have discussions about what positions EBHO should take on those bills, recommending whether we support or oppose or take no position, and then to mobilize our membership on priority legislation by providing people with template letters that they can use to send to legislators, as well as meeting with legislators in general on housing and on specific bills. We have periodically provided people with training on how to use the state legislature's website in order to follow bills, to look at the text, to see how those bills have changed, and how to keep abreast of the progress of a bill as it moves through the legislature. A major area for us in legislation in the last several years has been the Surplus Land Act. This is the state bill that requires that local agencies give priority for affordable housing when they are disposing of their surplus land. And EBHO, along with several other groups, has been the co-sponsor of legislation, including the sort of path-breaking bill, AB 1496 back in 2019, which has actually really expanded and strengthened the Surplus Land Act. This year, we are sponsoring AB 480, which is providing additional cleanup, tightening up some loopholes, and hopefully addressing some issues that haven't yet been addressed. We have posted on our website a list of our priority bills and endorsements. We try to keep that up to date. And if you participate in the committee, there's also a much more detailed tracking worksheet that we provide to committee members. Next slide, please. A big area for us in the last couple of years has been housing element advocacy. Every city, every 8 years, has to prepare a housing plan known as the housing element of their general plan. That starts with ABAG, the Association of Bay Area Governments, doing what's known as the Regional Housing Needs Allocation, which decides how much housing each city is expected to plan for and how much in each income category, very low, low, moderate, above moderate. We participated in that committee and focused very heavily on issues of equity and the new state requirement to affirmatively further fair housing, to push to make sure that some of the historically exclusionary high income, majority white suburbs that historically have not provided their fair share of housing were allocated numbers that would really push them into doing more housing in general and more affordable housing in particular. Once those allocations came out and cities started to work on their housing elements, we formed a housing element working group as a subcommittee of the policy committee, and we began to track housing elements in a number of jurisdictions in both Alameda and Contra Costa counties. We've provided education and training for our members and community members so that they could work in their own jurisdictions, attending hearings, writing comment letters, and so on. We've been tracking housing elements in over 25 jurisdictions. As Erin mentioned earlier, many cities have still not completed their housing element work, and so we're following that. And once they do adopt them, we'll be tracking their implementation over the next 8-year cycle. In this cycle, we focused in particular on affirmatively furthering fair housing and making sure that cities were rezoning areas that have typically not been zoned for affordable housing. We looked at issues around public land policies and around TOPA-COPA, things that some of the other folks have mentioned in our local committees was a focus for the things that we advocated for in housing element work. Next slide, please. At the regional level, as I mentioned, we started years ago with Plan Bay Area, which is a regional plan to integrate housing and transportation planning to promote transit-oriented development, reduce greenhouse gas emissions. We backed, as part of a coalition, an equity alternative plan that really tried to put the interests of low-income and marginalized communities at the center of that regional planning, particularly advocating for high levels of affordable housing close to transit. A second project we worked on recently was the Committee to House the Bay Area, known as CASA, which came up with a regional housing plan. We were part of a coalition of groups that was advising one of the co-chairs and really pushed the 3 Ps approach and made sure that that plan didn't just focus on production, but also focused on preservation and tenant protection. One of the things that came out of that committee was what's known as the Bay Area Housing Finance Agency, the first regional housing finance agency. And we've been working with them on pilot programs and their business plan. But most importantly, BAFA will be sponsoring a regional housing bond in 2024 that is expected to raise somewhere between $10 and $20 billion for housing in the Bay Area. That's more money than the state has ever done in a statewide bond issue. So this is going to be really critical. And over the next year or so, you're really going to be hearing more about that campaign. And we've already had at least one presentation at the Regional Policy Committee to talk about how that campaign is shaping up. Next slide. Lastly, we in the Regional Policy Committee also do some periodic advocacy in cities where we don't have dedicated committees. So at times we've been active in Alameda, El Cerrito, Antioch, Walnut Creek, as well as work at the county level of both Alameda and Contra Costa counties. We try to provide support and technical assistance for local groups doing work in their jurisdictions. People will also often come to us for advice on policies and how to advocate, and we're eager to help them in that area. Some of the issues in campaigns have been around inclusionary zoning, impact fees, public land. Recently, we've been focusing on social housing and had a discussion on social housing not too long ago. So all in all, we covered everything from state to regional to some local policy, and we certainly welcome people to join us and participate. I think somebody's going to drop a link in the chat, but you can write to me at jeff@ebho.org and let me know you're interested. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Jeff. That was super informative. Be sure to check out some of those links Jeff shared, including the state legislation on our website. And please email Jeff if you are interested in getting involved in any of that work. So that concludes our 6 committees. Really exciting. And we're going to start off with a couple panel questions that I have to just ask the folks who presented. And we would also love to hear questions from you. So please go ahead and drop those in the chat and we'll get to those in just a moment. So the first question is, what campaigns does EBHO have to look forward to in 2024? Angelina is going to tell us a little bit about the regional bond that Jeff just mentioned, and then I'd love to hear from anyone else who has thoughts as well.
Yeah, Sasha, that's probably the most exciting campaign that we have to look forward to. Like Jeff mentioned, this is the $10 to $20 billion 9-county bond, and as we know, the housing crisis is a regional issue, so this would be a huge step in the, like in the right direction of like trying to solve the issue. And as I think Jeff mentioned this a little bit, but BAFA, Bay Area Housing Finance Authority, so they're the ones that would be administering the funds. And this was an authority that was established by the California State Legislature in 2019. So right now, as far as the campaign is going, we are looking for endorsements from individuals, organizations, and we're just trying to get everybody amped up for the bond. And I'll drop in the website for the campaign where you can endorse, or you can add, there's an FAQ there as well if you have any questions about the bond. But yeah, I think that's probably like the most exciting campaign we have going. We still are working on public land for public good as well. We're in the middle of like the budget, so that's also an exciting campaign. But I would say, yeah, the BAFA, Bay Area Housing for All regional bond is super exciting.
Thank you so much. Angelina's leading a lot of our work around the regional bond. So definitely check that out. It is super exciting. Do any other committee leads have things coming up in the next year that they would like to let people know about?
I have a couple just to tag on to Angelina. If the regional bond passes, a lot of that money is going to flow back through the counties and the large cities, and they are going to have to come up with allocation plans. And we are already starting to think about what kind of advocacy work we can do with the county boards of supervisors in particular to prepare them for that work, so that if the bond passes, we'll be able to move pretty quickly from passage to actual implementation and getting that money out on the street and making sure that the money is allocated in a way that is equitable and really produces a great deal of affordable housing, as well as providing funding for preservation. Also be remiss if I didn't mention that apart from the regional bond, it looks like our own Assembly member Buffy Wicks is sponsoring legislation to put a state housing bond on the ballot in March of 2024. And if that happens, I'm sure we will be campaigning for that as well. So just wanted to mention that.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Steph.
And
Alrighty.
I'll just
go for it.
I'm sorry, Sasha. I'll just quickly
No, please do.
And once again mention the BART transit-oriented development processes in Berkeley that are happening at the 2 BART stations, Ashby and North Berkeley. For a small city or a city of Berkeley size, to have these 2 projects occurring that could bring around 1,500 new affordable homes is a really major opportunity in the area. And both of those BART stations where the development is going to happen are the 2 largest pieces of public land in Berkeley that kind of remain for new development. And so it's a really key opportunity. In addition to Berkeley, BART is also looking at housing development in a number of other jurisdictions across its system, including El Cerrito. They're also beginning a process to explore housing development around the Rockridge BART station. So the transit-oriented development campaigns and work will be going on for quite a number of years, but the Berkeley process is really going to be important over the next year, but there's certainly going to be other housing development processes around the transit stations for the next few years to come.
I will speak to the Oakland Committee, and also I think this relates to the RCOP committee. we are really excited to begin discussions around what we want the community benefits to be associated with the Oakland Coliseum. And so beginning later this summer, we are going to have sessions to really survey and talk with people to think about what it is that we want the Coliseum site to look like in terms of affordable housing, and even beyond that, talking about the environment and also jobs on that site.
Thank you so much, everyone. All right, anyone have any other thoughts on coming up in 2024? Or shall we move on? Okay, I'm going to move on to the next question. My next question is to Kathy. Kathy, if you don't mind, I'm wondering if you can share, what would you like affordable housing advocates who don't have lived experience to know about how to be more inclusive to folks who have lived experience of homelessness?
Well, what I would like them to do is, number one, is take their biased opinions and put them to the side. Don't just automatically feel that people that are homeless and that come with lived experience don't have a lot to offer, a lot of input and ideas to make change. Don't think that the people that are unhoused are mainly comprised of people with mental disabilities. I'm going to be honest, my disability is a mental disability, but I am doing nothing but thriving and making things happen and advocating for affordable housing and for the homeless. And I come with a mental disability. So I would like them to put their biased opinions and preconception thoughts of what a certain group is because of a certain thing about them, and just be open to what we have to offer and do not judge.
Thank you so much, Kathy. That's really well said. And Ronnie, if you don't mind me putting you on the spot as well, Ronnie is one of our co-conveners of Leadership Academy. Can you speak a little bit to some of the things EBHO has tried to do to make our spaces more inclusive?
So one of the things that I've learned doing faith-based work over the years is that there's often this conversation around the table, like who's welcome at the table. And sometimes the table is set up for certain types of people to sit at them. So we have to change the table, or we have to change the amount of seats, or we have to change the seats altogether. What I'm learning is that to be the most inclusive is to ask people what they want out of the experience, and to be prepared to meet folks where they are. Because interfaith work is challenging, because it's not that we all just come and sing Kumbaya, we're all together in love and light, which happens, there is some love and light happening. But there are realities that there are differences amongst our faith that can be a barrier to us connecting. And the best way to try to connect is to find that common ground and see what avenues we could put together to make a more cohesive group of people. So I hope that answered your question. I think I went all the way around.
No, that's great. Thank you.
Okay.
I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, I'm going to ask a couple audience questions that I've seen here. And I also want to invite folks, if you would like to ask a question out loud, feel free to raise your hand. For folks on the phone, to raise your hand during Q&A, you're going to press *9 on your keypad. So first up, I am going to go ahead and ask the question Anna put in the chat, which is great. And I'm going to give this one to Jeff. Jeff, can you please clarify the difference between affordable housing, which isn't always actually affordable, and below market rate housing? What are all the nuances there?
Great, thanks. And Anna, thank you. That's a really great question. So affordable housing is kind of a broad term. Generally, what's meant by it is housing that's affordable to people who qualify as low income under definitions that come down from HUD at the federal level and from the state. There are different kinds of affordable housing. And so there's public housing, there's Section 8 vouchers that go to tenants to help them find housing on the private market. And there is the kind of housing that a lot of nonprofit developers do, often financed with tax credits as well as money from local and state funding sources. That housing is below market rate. It rents for less than housing out on the market, and it's permanently restricted to be affordable. So unlike private housing where the rents, can go up really rapidly, there are limits on how much the rents can go up on affordable housing, even when somebody moves out and the next tenant moves in, which is really quite different from how rent control works. The term below market rate often gets used mostly for affordable home ownership. You tend to see a lot of folks saying BMR units, and that usually means the ownership. That said, it is true that particularly the nonprofit housing is not always affordable to people with the very lowest incomes, formerly homeless people, people with special needs, and with extremely low incomes, living on fixed incomes, for example. That's not a hard and fast rule because the developers of that kind of housing look for the kinds of subsidies that will allow them to rent even to people with very minimal incomes. And so if you really look at some of these projects, while not all of the units are affordable at the deepest level, many of them have 20, 30% of the units set at really low levels. And lately, both the Alameda County and the city of Oakland have actually been requiring that some 20% of the housing in those projects has to be deeply affordable. But we need all of these. So we need more Section 8 money. We need more public housing, as well as more subsidies to nonprofit housing to make it more deeply affordable. Thank you for that question.
Thank you so much, Jeff. That was really helpful. Got a comment in the chat. Excellent, clear explanations, Jeff. I agree. All right, I'm going to ask another audience question, and I'm going to give this one to Dolores. What are the obstacles you face within the Oakland City Council to accomplish your goals for the city housing? What seems to be their priorities right now, and what's last on their list to prioritize?
Yeah, so I mean, the biggest obstacle right now with the budget is that we're in a deficit year. So we do not have a lot of room, or so the city council and the mayor tells us, that there maybe isn't necessarily a lot of room to be imaginative, or to basically what they're saying is, if you want to fund a particular program, then you have to tell us where those funds are going to come from, what's going to get cut. But luckily for us, that really applies to the general fund mostly, and very little, if any, of the general fund money actually goes into the HCD department, which is how affordable housing is funded. So what our main focus is this year with the budget is we're really trying to make sure that, one, the money that is dedicated to affordable housing and is supposed to be earmarked and used for affordable housing is going to affordable housing. There's been 2 incidences of public land being sold, and the money from that disposition, from that sale, ended up being allocated to other funds that were not affordable housing, despite the fact that in 2018, City Council passed a policy saying, if we sell public land, that will go towards HCD and to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. So yeah, that's the big thing that we're facing right now, is how do we make sure that the money that is dedicated to housing is actually going there? For the most part, it is. There's some small instances where it's not. And in terms of city council priorities, we have some really strong allies on city council that are very supportive of affordable housing and understand why it's crucial in the city. They see it very directly. We know that it's a huge issue, but what it really comes down to is us advocating to them to make sure that they are speaking with their votes and that we are pushing council members to vote their ethics, to vote their politics or their supposed politics that they're telling us in meetings. And so that is where we have the space where we come into play, where our membership comes into play, and where we can advocate.
Thank you so much, Dolores. Yeah, that's the importance of people power. Awesome. That was really helpful. Okay, so over the past year or two, a lot of our work has been around the drafting of housing elements in different jurisdictions. So going forward, what is EBHO's role in following up on the implementation of those housing elements? I think I'll go to Jeff to answer this one first.
It looks like a lot of things. I think one of the things we want to do is look at the actual action plans in each housing element, and particularly at the new programs that cities promise to do, and see if they are actually implementing them and doing them on the schedule that they provided. If they don't, they are actually out of compliance and we would file a complaint with the state. But we also want to have a role in shaping those programs. It's one thing to say in the housing element, we will consider a tenant protection ordinance by the end of 2024. It's another thing to make sure that that's a strong ordinance that really protects tenants. So one of the things we'll want to do is follow up on implementation. The other is just to be tracking overall performance on production compared to the RHNA numbers, those needs numbers, because what we've seen in the past is that while the numbers for the needs are one thing, what actually gets built is really quite different and mostly at the high end of the market. We are planning to work with our sister organizations in other subregions in the Bay Area, the South Bay, the West Bay, on some kind of joint report looking back on the housing element cycle that just ended, which was an 8-year cycle, and really reporting on what people did compared to those numbers, which overall cities met or exceeded their goals for market rate housing and fell very short on affordable. And we want to highlight that in general so that we can really push for people to focus on, we need to focus on the housing that's not getting built instead of incentivizing what the market's already doing. And then to highlight, which cities did better and which cities did worse, maybe do a kind of a report card even.
Thank you so much, Jeff. That's super helpful. I'm curious to hear, Sophia, in the Berkeley housing element, what programs are you excited about? What are you hoping that they implement? Maybe what are you hoping that they change?
Very similar to what Jeff said, we will be monitoring the programs that they have proposed, that they want a whole lot of new programs in the Berkeley housing element. A lot of it was, we're going to continue some current initiatives, we're going to strengthen some things. So we definitely want to be monitoring that. One thing that did occur that we were not that pleased about, they took the Berkeley TOPA ordinance proposal out of the housing element as a separate program, which does mean that they don't have to report on it specifically or make a commitment to consider it at a particular time. So that is an issue and a reason why we continue to follow the Berkeley TOPA process very strongly and continue to urge council to pass a strong TOPA policy in Berkeley as soon as possible as part of protecting current Berkeley residents from displacement.
Got it. Thank you so much. And then last on this question, I'd love to go to Erin. I know there's a couple new tenant protection policies in the Concord housing element that you're going to be watching.
Yeah, like I mentioned, there's the Concord housing element as it exists now. It's still in flux, has some commitments to developing some tenant protection policies, which is really necessary in the monument corridor. It would look like just cause, some rent control, though the devil's going to be in the details. So a big part of our ongoing work is going to be figuring out, when are they actually going to bring that forward? What is that program actually going to look like? How do we make it the most effective it can be? And then to echo something that Jeff mentioned, of, it's really exciting, this process, that there's so much more teeth to the housing element process than there's ever been before. People have to take it more seriously. They have to stay in compliance. They can be compliant, and then if they don't actually keep up on things, they can stop being compliant. And that's going to be really important, especially for our goals around affirmatively furthering fair housing, which is what I mentioned briefly in the presentation of, breaking into these exclusionary areas, redressing historical inequalities, things like that. That's another big priority we've had in Concord, especially because so much of it needs to be done there. And so we're going to be trying to make sure they, are actually doing those programs, are really doing them to the maximum extent they have. And if they aren't, saying you're no longer in compliance with state law.
Thank you so much. All righty. And this last question that we got is a great segue into our closing slide. So I'm going to go ahead and answer this. So someone says, this is so much information. I don't know much about affordable housing yet. Can I still get involved? And what are the next steps? Megan, would you mind throwing up the contact slide for us? Okay, so I'm happy to go over the next steps. So the next steps towards getting involved, if you were interested in anything that you heard today in particular, strongly encourage you to reach out to the committee lead for the committee that we talked about. Everyone's contact information is here. And if you are not an EBHO member yet, you are more than welcome to inquire for information, get on the mailing list, attend a committee meeting to see what's up before you have to make the decision of whether or not to become a member. If you would like to become a member, we would love to have you on board. It's sliding scale dues. They start at $5 annually. You can get more information at ebho.org/membership, or you can reach out to our membership and operations manager, Aziza Crowder. You can reach her at membership@ebho.org. If you don't know that much about affordable housing and this is intimidating, where to start with that? So I encourage you to utilize the resources of the folks who presented today. We all want everyone at the table. You don't need to have a PhD in housing anything. This should not be as complicated as it is. And the fact that it is so complicated to learn about housing legislation is one of the reasons why we live in this exclusionary system that we do. It's on purpose. So our goal as EBHO is really to break it down and make it as easy for you as possible. So please ask for help. We are happy to help you. If you are a resident of affordable housing or a staff member for affordable housing building, we also encourage you to learn more about our Leadership Academy. It's a super helpful program. It's completely free, and our organizers walk through teaching folks a lot of this stuff. If you want to learn more about that, reach out to Damien, the RCOP contact. And last but certainly not least, we have a lot of resources on our website as well. So we have the study room. It's our online learning library that has a deep dive into all of this different affordable housing information. So information about why is the housing market so expensive and racist in the Bay Area? What happens there? You can learn a little bit more about the history of that. You can learn about how to fix it. What are the things that we're doing? We have a series of organizing trainings from Dolores on there where you can learn more about how to get involved in your community. You can learn more about interviews with different residents of affordable housing. You can see photos of what affordable housing buildings actually look like and what different types of options there are out there. So it is a wealth of resources. That is ebho.org/study-room. And last but not least, we'll send a follow-up email to everyone with these slides and this information. So thank you so much for being here today. We really appreciate it. Please feel free to reach out if you have any more questions for us. Thank you.